Is Ukraine on a fast track to join the European Union? This morning, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced that the European Commission intends to open a cluster of chapters that are part of the accession process for Ukraine to join the European Union very shortly. So what does all of this mean to the layperson, someone who is not an EU lawyer? Because actually, in a past life, I worked as a lawyer for the European Commission in the legal service many moons ago. However, that puts me obviously in a better position to explain to you exactly what is happening. And if you're new to this channel, Привіт, my name is Connor Klein. I'm an expert in international relations. Been living in Ukraine for many years, speak both Ukrainian and Russian. So I'm here to give you a more informed, nuanced, and unique perspective on the happenings of the Russo-Ukrainian war and the geopolitical events surrounding it, like Ukraine's accession to the European Union. So, quite simply, after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Ukraine applied to join the European Union. That was something that wasn't likely to have happened actually in the short to medium term prior to the 2022 invasion. However, they accelerated that and applied almost immediately. I think it was actually the 28th of February 2022, so just 4 days after Russia launched this extended invasion of Ukraine. I'm using the word invasion because apparently if you were in Russia and you use the word invasion as a YouTuber, they throw you in prison. That happened to an American YouTuber. I had a video about that guy 2 days ago, but that was actually apparently because he used the word invasion in the description to a video, but it is an invasion. So after they had applied, then simply the EU institutions have to look at whether this country that is applying is eligible. They meet the basic criteria for joining the European Union potentially at some point in the future. Then there is a decision made to make them officially an EU candidate country. That also happened in 2022 for Ukraine and for the neighboring country of Moldova. And then afterwards, they decide to open the accession negotiations, and then they have to decide to open chapters of what is known as the acquis communautaire. That's a French term meaning basically the body of law of the European Union. And after that, there will be several other phases that I'll briefly touch on in a few moments. So basically today what we're seeing is that, or in the coming days, we're going to see the opening of chapters. So in short, eventually, if Ukraine joins the European Union, EU law will be applicable in Ukraine. Therefore, you need to harmonize your laws and your standards and your legal infrastructure, your political infrastructure, so that it is compatible with being a member of the European Union and that those laws will be in place. You can't just one day to the next say, okay, we're in the European Union now, EU law is what counts here. There is a process of harmonization in order to get there. So that process in general takes a long time. In fact, the entire accession process, normally if we look back in the last few years when, say, Croatia joined, it's over 10 years ago now, they were actually, from the moment they became officially an EU candidate countries to when they officially became a member of the European Union, it was over 10 years. So Ukraine became an official candidate country back in 2022, so it's about just over 2 years ago. So if you use that as a benchmark, then joining the EU would be at least 2032 or beyond, because Croatia was a smaller country, dramatically smaller in terms of population, probably about 1/10 approximately, and obviously in terms of landmass, even smaller than that compared to Ukraine. Ukraine has an enormous agricultural industry that could be quite problematic in terms of its accession, because it may actually require the reform of the common agricultural policy, which is a very contentious EU policy and very hard to renegotiate. And of course, there is the Russo-Ukrainian war, and 20%, well, a little bit less than 20% of Ukrainian territory is currently occupied by Russia. So these are quite big differences between Croatia's accession process and the situation obviously that Ukraine finds itself in right now. So if we're using that as a benchmark, then a minimum of 10 years, we would have to think, well, if it took 10 years for Croatia, I mean, we would expect to be a lot longer for Ukraine. However, Ukraine is making pretty dramatic progress on that path to join the European Union in the current circumstances, because it will now actually open up these chapters, or basically the body of EU law that has to be harmonized. It's broken up into a series of chapters. There's roughly around 30 of them, and basically the European institutions agree to open up those chapters. Then they obviously go through and they have benchmarks that the country that has applied needs to meet, and then at the end they can officially close the chapters. And once all those chapters are closed, then every member state of the EU must agree to the accession. So in Ukraine's case, that would be every individual country, like Ireland, like Hungary, which may be well, at the moment it would be a problem probably, but who knows who would be in power in Hungary at the point in which Ukraine would be eligible to join the European Union, and so forth. The EU institutions themselves all have to agree, and the actual country acceding to the European Union would have to agree. So Ukraine itself would have to decide that it wants to join. Presumably that's going to be the least of the hurdles that have to be surmounted at that point, but who knows what would happen in the future. So if we look at the accession progress of Ukraine, in spite of all the obstacles, it's already at the point of opening up chapters, and the European Commission has actually been glowing about its rate of progress. Obviously, Ukraine is super motivated to join. They have the biggest war in Europe since World War II, with Russia basically desperately trying to prevent Ukraine from joining Euro-Atlantic institutions, we could say. They were extremely unlikely to have ever joined NATO before the 2022 invasion. However, there was always the potential that Ukraine would apply to join the European Union in the medium to long term. If we look at other countries that joined, say, in 2004, we look at the 3 Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. If we look at Poland, the GDP per capita that those countries enjoy, even if we put it at PPP, or power purchasing parity, they are multiples of what Ukraine has achieved by more or less staying within Russia's sphere of influence up until at least 2014, when it made a break to get out of Russia's sphere of influence. And obviously the Russo-Ukrainian war started with Russia's invasion of Crimea. If we look at the living standards just in general that Ukraine enjoyed versus those countries that had made a beeline to join the European Union and also NATO for protection from a Russian invasion primarily, then it is stark. Also, those countries like Poland, the 3 Baltic states, have higher living standards than Russia itself. Its GDP per capita is at least, even at PPP, is at least 50% higher, probably with this economic shenanigans that's been going on in Russia in the last few years with the 2022 invasion. It's probably going to be close to double the GDP per capita in PPP pretty soon, because Russia's economy is facing huge issues going into 2025. We'll see where they're at by the end of the year, what is left of their economy, but it doesn't look good for them. Obviously, Ukrainians are quite happy about that. So in short, Ukrainians have a huge incentive to keep on track to join the European Union quicker than would be normally expected. Again, that 10-year benchmark that Croatia has set by being the latest country to have joined the European Union would seem to be the minimum. However, Ukraine is probably going at a faster clip than Croatia was in terms of joining. Also Moldova, which is a lot smaller country, which doesn't have an active war, though it does have de facto pro-Russian separatist republic that's unrecognized in Transnistria, that we would probably have to find some solution to in order to join the European Union, perhaps not. Also, Cyprus joined without resolving the conflict, or the border, the de facto and not de jure border on the north of the island. So we're seeing them go at quite an impressive pace. If we look at the other countries that have been waiting to join the European Union, only really Montenegro looks like it may join in the medium term. There is a date of 2028 that seems to be what the Montenegrins are working towards. That again, they have been a candidate country already for over 10 years. So that process, if it goes up until 2028 to actually become official member, will be over 15 years. So Ukraine joining maybe by 2030, yes, that would be incredibly fast. That would be basically 8 years from having become a candidate country. That is actually the target of neighboring Moldova. They have it on all their signs, 2030. It seems possible, not probable, but possible, that is the time frame that they are working on, and that will be incredibly fast considering how long it has taken other countries to join and how long the other EU candidate countries, like you have Serbia, you have Albania, you have Turkey is still officially a candidate country. Obviously, that hasn't made much progress for a long time, that accession, that candidacy to join the European Union. So if Ukraine keeps up its rate of progress, it seems possible that they will become a member of the European Union by 2030. I'll leave it at that for today's video. Hope that has provided some sort of direction and useful information about where Ukraine is on its accession project. And actually, it's interesting. I'll just tell a final little anecdote that it was many years ago. At this point, I have to think back. It's at least more than 5 years. I gave a presentation at a university in Ukraine about EU accession and Ukraine. I asked the students when they thought that Ukraine would join the European Union, and they really thought that Ukraine could join within 5 or 6 years from that point. And that was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And it took the 2022 invasion for Ukraine to even apply to be a candidate country. So sometimes the perceptions, and that was actually to the law faculty at a university. So even lawyers who should have a better idea about what the EU accession process means and how long it should take, also had a very rose-tinted idea about how quickly Ukraine could join. So I will leave today's video at that and see you tomorrow in the next one. Do побачення.